Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, Derek and I got a treat for you today. That is because every single time I talk about Xbox 360 static recomps and ask you guys if you could snap your fingers and make one game show up as a recomp soon. Condemned 2 is definitely leading the charge, probably in the top 3 games always mentioned. And as of this morning, there is a Condemned 2 static recomp out that you can play today, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. And honestly, both Condemned and Condemned 2 absolutely outstanding games that really deserve more love, and maybe they will get some more love this way. Because I remember playing these back on the Xbox 360, absolutely loving them, and then coming back in here to play the recomp, I was reminded just how atmospheric and interesting these games truly are. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But after I've recorded this video, I popped into Xenia to see how it actually ran there, and I will say I'm getting better performance for lower overhead than I did in Xenia. Now there's still going to be every once in a while a little bit of a loading hitch. I think that's just down to the engine and how it works, but that's the one thing I did notice. Otherwise, this was a very smooth, very controllable, very fun to play experience from start to finish, or at least until I stopped the capture. Because of course with static recomps they come out and I do a video 8-10 hours later. I have not run through the entire game, and as the days go on, I am sure you'll hear more about this one. But I talked to a few other people that were testing it, and one person said they were probably about 3 hours in and had no issues whatsoever sitting down and enjoying the game. Before we get too much further involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But you're going to be seeing a lot more Xbox 360 static recomps coming out on the RexGlue side of things. Some of them are going to be using native renderers, some of them are going to be using a little bit of Xenia underpinning it until they switch out for a native renderer. As I've mentioned in previous videos, a native rendering solution is going to be a little bit game-to-game specific. That is because every single game is going to use the Xbox 360 hardware slightly differently, and the calls to its actual GPU and how the engine works in conjunction with those. But for something that is underpinning this right now, I will say the performance really is solid. This is definitely running better than software emulation, and it did take less system resources on my PC than running the same game in Xenia. And the nice thing is, because it uses the same files, you're in a situation where you can test them back and forth. Right there you did see a little bit of that pause hitch, definitely loading in an asset, so I'm not sure if that's something that can actually be improved even with a full static recomp, or if that's just going to be something that the engine kind of forces there, because even on native PC applications, brand new games, we do sometimes see that when assets are loaded in, you do have a slight pause, so it's not really unheard of. But short of that little bit of a loading pause, the performance here was smooth on my system, and just so you can baseline it, I have an i9-12900K with a 3080 Ti and 64 gigabytes of RAM, and even though that's probably going to be overkill for using this actual static recomp, I do like to let you guys know what system I'm using, because even though static recomps will bring down the overhead compared to pure software emulation, this isn't still going to be a situation where you can bring a potato to the party and expect that potato to hang all night. It's definitely going to get tired and want to go to bed early. And for people that are curious how these things are made, I went through the GitHub and there's only one contributor listed, PSX Restore, the developer of this one, and no evidence of LLMs. Now sometimes that information does change as time goes on, so as of the recording of this video, that is the current situation. So if it's something that you care about, there's no evidence of it. If you don't care about it, then you wouldn't really care either way. But as we go through the world of Condemned here, I will say the number one thing I noticed right off the top outside of smooth performance is the fact that I really didn't pick up a single graphical glitch the entirety of my capture session on this one. I will look for different textures, polygons having issues, anything that would make you think that it wasn't running well, and I didn't spot that in any of my footage or during my gameplay time. All the inputs were fast and responsive, there wasn't any latency there, but of course having not played this game for maybe probably 7-8 years now, I definitely still had a little bit of a learning curve on the parry timing and everything else. Because Condemned 2 is not a game where you can just point yourself straight forward and start mashing on the attack buttons like they owe you money and expect to have success. You need to have timing, you need to understand how all the mechanics work, or else you're not going to be able to survive very long. Well, I will say the one thing I hate about the game is that it makes you hit a dog with a board. But let's do the first 2 soundtrack samples so you can catch the audio quality, and I'll be right back with a lot more.
Residents, find safety indoors immediately. Do not remain on the street. I repeat, return to your homes and lock the doors.
I mean, it just sounds like Condemned 2 to me, but you leave a comment down below and you tell me what you think. So as we go further into the game, obviously this is a very dark, very gray environment where we have real-time lighting, fires, the flashlight coming out of the character, and everything else. And again, that is all drawing incorrectly with this static recomp because again, it is using some Xenia underneath it. But how this works is the entirety of the PowerPC code, all of the game code, the logic and everything else is being statically recompiled and then run as a kind of native instruction set for your x86 processor, versus when you're doing software emulation, that PowerPC CPU needs to be emulated. That way it can actually talk to the hardware in your system, because the Xbox 360 was all PowerPC based just like PlayStation 3 was, and that is not a CPU that we use anymore, at least in some sort of consumer settings. I know there's still some PowerPC chips out there in airplanes because they have this really weird kind of resistance to radiation, so you can't get a bit flip. A very weird fact, but just something that I figured you guys would find interesting. So obviously you can see here in the combat, it's fast, it's fluid, and there is no issue. And I looked at Google in between the soundtrack sample and doing this voice line, and apparently the engine on this definitely does have some load hitching when it's actually bringing in more assets. So that might be something that actually doesn't really get improved on any sort of static recomp. Maybe in the future somebody could mod it to get those kind of hitches out of there. But like I said, I was just recently playing Wolfenstein: The New Order for a Steam machine capture, and that would definitely pause and hitch at the same time when it wanted to load in new things. And that's just kind of trying to put, for lack of a better term, 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bucket when you're trying to load in assets while also running the game. So that's just something we always see. But as we move further in, I like to do a static recomp checklist when I talk about whether or not something is fun to play. First, it has to perform well, and it has to be better than the software emulation options available, and Condemned 2 static recomp is definitely hitting those marks. Secondarily, the visuals have to be good, and if there are any bugs or glitches, they have to be very minimal so they aren't distracting. We have the exact same thing here with Condemned 2, and I'm not even cutting the footage here just so you can see it running in a row to see if you can find anything that you don't like about that. As far as the sound is concerned, sounds like the game to me, no issues there. And on the control side, outside of the fact that I decided to burn myself just to get past that fence, all of the controls work. You can play the game doing all the parries and everything, so long as you know the timing will work here with really no latency whatsoever, as you'll see right now, blocking that one shot and then going ahead and hitting the goo monster. And if you've never played Condemned 2 before, I can't stress enough, this is a really fun game. It was really kind of its time and place in the Xbox 360. It was one of the few games that ended up with that kind of black and brown colorway where it actually made thematic sense versus a lot of the other games where they would not put color in even though they were environments that would actually have color. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, are you stoked for a Condemned 2 static recomp or not? And hopefully we get the original Condemned as a static recomp as well, because it really is fun to kind of follow along with the story, because this, you can jump in and not really understand what happened in the events of Condemned 1, but it does kind of give you some more flavor text if you played that game. But let's do one more soundtrack sample so you can hear the audio quality, and I'll be right back with a bit more. Sometimes when I say soundtrack, what I really kind of mean is soundscape, because Condemned 2 doesn't have a ton of music, but you get this really kind of ephemeral sound in the background, kind of like the sounds of a city when you're in a back alley, and you can hear signs of life, but they are really far away. Even the audio in this game is gritty, it's a little bit mushy in all the best ways, and all the impact shots absolutely sound wet when you're hitting somebody in the face with a pipe. And even though I've never seen that in real life, I would imagine it probably does sound kind of squishy and just a little bit wet along with that hard bone impact. But obviously not getting into too many details, it's one of those things, the audio definitely sells the overall visceral nature of Condemned 2, and this static recomp is definitely doing everything I need it to. So if you want to check this one out, the link is in the GitHub description below. Just make sure you go through the directions, because you have to unpack your legally owned copy of Condemned 2 to get it to run. But as long as you can use one application and basically unpackage a disk image, you will be good to go, because this worked first time for me, and that's what I love to see. But sure that this game is also hilarious, you can do stuff like this. But I'll see you next time. Bye bye.